All right. Thanks for joining us today on Going Solar in 2023, What You Need to Know. I have a team of experts here who are going to discuss everything to consider from rising energy costs to solar benefits to costly mistakes to avoid as a homeowner to financing in today's rising with today's rising interest rates. So, first up, we're going to have Jeff Delgado. He is the president and founder of iLeverage, an insurance agency who also has a solar division. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Carla, how you doing? Thank you for having me today. Excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to get your take on some of the benefits of going solar.
Sure. I first thank all you guys for jumping on and listening in. It's an interesting time in the world, and I believe most of the questions regarding solar, for me, it was kind of overwhelming. There was so much going on with solar. People were asking a lot of questions over the last few years. A lot of my clients, I own a business, and a lot of my clients were asking questions on should I get solar? Which direction should I go? Why should I do it? So, what I'm going to cover, if you're okay with it, Carla, is some of the basics on why someone would consider solar, what I was told, and how it's been making an impact with our clients. So, our clients that we try to educate them on understanding different ways of going solar, how they can own it and control their energy bills and things like that. So, it's okay to just share my slides. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Make sure I got this going right. And then let me know if you could see my slides possibly correctly. You see it correctly there, Carla?
Yep.
All right, great. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I know we have a bunch of people on the panel, so I'm going to be very cautious of time. We own iLeverage is a company that has many different divisions. So we start out just an insurance agency. We became an investment advisory firm. And then we added solar by the demand of our clients asking so many questions regarding why they should get solar. So we added a division a couple of years ago, which was really a service industry, to be honest. And then it turned into an amazing division that people started coming to us for all kinds of questions on it. And then we made a big impact because we believe that timing is everything. And if you're listening to this today, and if you don't have solar or you're considering it, it's a very interesting time because of a lot of the rules. And I know they're gonna get into that in this call today, but all these different regulations that have come out and changed the way solar will be offered and how that affects you and how it affects the your energy bill is very amazing. So you're going to want to listen in to what we're going to talk about today. This was just a quote by Warren Buffett, an interview on Forbes magazine, where he says that energy deregulation will be the largest transfer of wealth in history. So that was the reason why our division of the iLeverage Solar division got excited about this because it's another wealth transfer. It's another movement of what's happening and what's to come. As you probably know, people are all going to be eventually driving electric cars. People are eventually all going to be in homes that have solar as well. So why not get in front of it and be there when it's, when it's early versus getting there when it may be a little bit later and have different types of benefits. What we do differently is we are not subject to any one company's product or service. We are independent, but we offer many of the largest names, if not the biggest names in the solar industry. So if you are interested in solar, you want to talk to someone who at least has the right companies and not just one, because some differences may make a big impact on your bill and your goals and objectives. So we heard of probably SunPower. You probably heard of Sunrun, the largest solar company in the country, and SunPower is kind of known as the Apple computers, if you will, of solar. And then we also have many other carriers that you may have heard of before, ESP and Cubics. The bottom line is we are not subject to any one company product or service. The whole point of solar is this little picture, believe it or not, is the distribution and transmission of energy. I look at solar kind of like a hot dog, like if you ever eat a hot dog, it's really good, but you don't know how it got there. You know how they made it. Very similar to energy, right? Like you don't know how you got energy into your home, but the further out they had to get the energy in terms of the transmission and the generation and the generators and the distribution of energy, all that, if you look at your bill carefully, you're paying for that. So from the generators to transmitting it to your home, that's going to cost money. But when you have solar, all you're really doing is getting the power directly from the sun, going into your roof to an inverter, and then boom, you own your own power. So it's, to me, a very simple conversation, and there's a lot of little details, and we're going to have other people talk more about that in the couple speakers coming up. But the whole idea is to control a bill that most of my life I didn't control. For example, you can't control the water bill. You can't control certain bills that are going into your homes and make it a fixed expense. And specifically as you get older in life, and unfortunately, I'm getting older like anyone else. You want to fix your expenses as you get to certain times of your life. So, like, you want predictable expenses in the future. Where if you could make energy and not worry about what interest rates of the energy bills are going to cost, you could do that in solar by controlling it. And so, last couple of slides. These are some of the reasons why people are going solar. I'm not going to go through it. I'll go through it real quick. It lowers your electrical bill. You'll bring your bill much lower. There's a new mandate, Senate Bill 100, that all new homes in California must have solar. And so all new homes will eventually all have solar, and all new homes have solar today. You'll also get a 30% tax incentive. It also helps bring the value up in your home, according to Zillow. It also is clean energy, so it's great for the environment. It's just cleaner and better for the environment. And you could also get a battery that can also store energy and make your home extremely efficient by powering it on days where maybe it's potentially a blackout or some sort of a tragedy happens in the country where you never know if your energy goes out. And so it gives you the peace of mind that you'll have your lights on no matter what happens. So you control that as well, utilizing a battery. So the reason why people are going solar, there's so many reasons, but there's also the reason of new rules like the NEM 3.0, where you're not able to get the power and credit back into the grid, which is a big deal as of right now. And I know, Zach, you'll probably cover that. But last slide, and I'll kind of close out, is going solar, whether you want to look at it that way or not, it's a financial decision. You have to look at things like how long you have to make the payment. Do you want to purchase the panels, or do you want to lease the panels? Or would you like to get what is called a PPA? That's another option available for solar. You could also free up the money that you're paying in PG&E and put that in places that could work for you and give you better advantages for things that you may really want to focus on in retirement, or maybe a goal you want to save or something else like that. Also, solar is a very low risk, high reward of investment. It's something that you could control. And like I mentioned earlier, solar could also help tremendously in retirement. And what I mean by that is, what people are more concerned about is being able to be clear and predict what their bills will look like at certain times of their life. And so having a solar bill be fixed for your whole life is a big factor, and eventually eliminating your energy bill altogether would be an amazing goal. So I know we're going to go into much more than what I talked about now. I just want to give a brief 10-minute intro of why I believe the timing is right to go solar. I know, Zach, you're probably going to come in and go into that, but I just hope that's enough information to get you guys excited about it, ask questions about it, and then we can go from there. So let me go and stop sharing my screen.
Gotcha, Jeff. Thank you for that overview. Yeah, that was really informative. I think we're going to go into, so we do have Zach, solar expert, and he's going to chime in a little bit more about some of the costs, some of the benefits that Jeff just went over.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carla. And thank you, Jeff. That was that was an amazing introduction. So yeah, just like Jeff was talking about, guys. So the breakdown of solar and why it makes sense to go right now. And I don't know if you guys have heard about NEM 3.0, as Jeff has mentioned, but that's going to be coming, it's going to be live April 13th. And so what I did, I'm going to actually show you guys a realistic example today that I actually proposed to one of my clients. So today, let's say their bill is typically, their utility bill is anywhere from $200 to $300. And that's the case for this client. So what I did for him, I was like, say ballpark 250, we just went with. So I started drawing this chart for him, and we went into 5-year increments all the way to 30 and 25. And we went to a range of what his actual utility bill is. So we're going to mark this at 250. Now today I was able to propose for his full installment and everything, a $163 payment that is going to be fixed. Now I'll explain that here in a second, but I know it's a little messy. I'm sorry for my handwriting, but what I want you guys to understand is the visual aspect of this. Now there's an increase of about 8% annually for utility companies. So keep in mind 8% usage or 8% annual percent on your usage. Now, with your 250, what you think that's going to do over about a 30-year period of time, it's going to have a slight increase, but it's going to compound. So that's where that 8% comes into play over the years. Now, what solar does is it puts you on a fixed rate over a 25-year period and then drops off. So what this does is it locks you in and it allows you to prevent, obviously, the escalation of your bill from the utility company, because now that you own your power, now you're able to have the opportunity to save everything in between. And there's only so much you could do with all the savings, like how Jeff was saying, as far as like retirement goes, having a fixed rate, everybody wants something that they can control, not something that's out of control where they, this is only 8%. Keep in mind, PG&E went up 20% alone just this last year. So if you can, this is just a relatively conservative number here, but that's literally what I went over with my client. And, solar obviously just makes sense right now. And especially with what Jeff was saying, there's just no better time, especially with the NEM 2.0. We're able to grandfather people in for 20 years. So
can you go over that a little bit for people who have no idea what NEM 2.0, 2.3 is?
Yeah, absolutely. So say for NEM 2.0, I can actually use this example still. So NEM 2.0, we can lock you in, say for this client, this wouldn't be your guys' number, but I'm able to lock in my client at 163 until the 25-year mark, right?
And that's for purchased panels or leased panels?
This will be for purchase now.
Okay.
So this is for purchase. Sorry. Yeah. So for purchase, it'd be the 25-year fixed rate. Now, if the client was to wait until April 13th, where he or she is now, obligated to go to NEM 3.0 route, you're looking at an estimate of at least $60 a month increase on this bill alone. So instead of 163, you'd be looking at 223 at a minimum, just for this person. Now, I know this is just an example. So if you guys are in this ballpark, or you guys can kind of figure in, plus we can sit down with you guys and explain this a little bit further for your own personal case. But this is just a good example to show how much you're able to save within these two parameters. So
okay.
But,
just to clarify, NEM is a program specific to California. And one of the key changes happening in 2023 is that we're going from NEM 2.0 to NEM 3.0 in April of this year. And that sounds to me like a cost increase. Can you explain why that increase is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So the increase in the cost is obviously, one, you have to get a battery, because for your nighttime usage, right? So April 13th, once you're at the April 13th and you don't have solar and you try to go solar, one thing's going to happen whenever you go solar. You're going to have a payment for your solar, for your panels, and then you'll also have your nighttime usage payment. And that's going to also be at an increased cost. It's not going to be at today's rate where they have. Once NEM 3.0 comes out, everything's going to be increased. Plus, you're not going to be able to achieve, or how Jeff said, you're not going to be able to, collect those credits for the overproduction that you generate and you put back into the grid. That's not going to happen. So there's there's actually a lot of savings that are, at stake before April 13th.
Okay. So before, with NEM 2.0, people who own solar owned their usage and could use their extra credits for nighttime use.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right? So the overproduction would, it would cover your nighttime, and then anything that was actually overproduction, like I said, it gets, pushed back to the grid, and you're actually able to get a credit. As into 3.0, you're not looking like you're able to do that.
Okay. So no more being able to use your overproduction and solar energy. So to offset that in NEM 3.0 coming April, you have to buy a battery in order for you to be able to use sorry, am I explaining this right? In order to energy during the night.
Yeah, so basically you'd have to have the battery to offset the nighttime usage, like you're saying. Honestly, April 13th, you don't get a battery with your solar panels, it's not going to make sense. Because you'll end up having two bills. Now the nighttime usage is going to be smaller than your utility bill, but again, you got to remember you're tacking on that solar panel. So
got it. Okay, so thanks for going over that. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that one once we get to the financing part. All right, thanks, Doc. So we'll see in a little bit. I'm gonna bring on Vito. He is the team lead of the Abitano Group Compass.
Hey, Carla.
Hey, Vito. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
So I really wanted to have your perspective on the solar situation because, as you know, our last deal that we did had a huge solar issue, which is one of the reasons why I even wanted to put this together, because I thought that solar situation could have easily cost us that deal. So just to go over briefly what that situation was, we were representing the buyers, and we were in escrow on a home that had leased solar panels. Now the sellers weren't aware that the company that they leased those panels with went bankrupt shortly after they purchased those panels or leased those panels. To top that off, there was a huge question as to whether or not those panels were even producing any energy because they haven't been serviced in a long while. There's nobody to help verify that since the company was bankrupt. And then to add to all of that, the roof was nearing its last leg. So the roof, it was on a very, very old roof that had to be replaced. And so that turned out to be extra cost to remove the panels, reinstall the panels. So that's definitely something to consider too. So let's get your take on that. Do you have any other nightmare stories regarding solar panels or anything?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. It's the wild, wild west with solar power. I have solar on my house. I have one regret, and I wish that I didn't lease it. It was a PPC, and I believe Jeff mentioned what PPC or PPA was, but I wish I financed it all the way through instead of leasing it or PPA or what have you, simply because there's a value proposition. Now, when you go to sell your house and you have a leased item on it, it could be solar panel, it could be water softener, it could be whatever. You can't add, that's actually a liability. It's not an asset to the property. So you cannot add value to it. So you have to be very specific and be very careful about that. I've had people knock on my door and say, we can just lease it or PPC it or PPA it and say, hey, it'll add value to it. You lose complete credibility with me when I hear that because you have no idea what you're talking about. I know Jeff knows what he's talking about because we had that conversation. You understand that when you add something that's a lease, it's just like if you lease a car, that's not an asset to your estate, to your value, to your value profile. So just be very, very careful about what you're doing. There is nothing wrong with leasing solar. There's nothing wrong with doing the PPA, but you have to know what companies you're working with. And when it goes to transfer, you have to know that it's easy to do the transfer. There's a system set up and it's very well documented. So you know what's going on. And in your case, you had a realtor who was, I hate to use the term ignorant, but she didn't know what the process was, right? So technically it's ignorant. not in a bad sense. She had it in her head that this is the way it's the buyer's problem, and it's not something I have to deal with. It is everybody's problem. And if the sooner you figure out, hey, I'm selling the house, you let the solar company, hey, I'm selling the house, you let the sellers and buyers know, you let the lenders know, you let your bank know, you let everybody know there's solar on the house, we're selling the house. Just make sure that we're all on the same level of communication so we know what's going on. We've had a same situation where I sold a house down in Aromas, down in the country in Monterey County, and they said there was a brand new solar system on it. It had never been picked up. It was a leased. It was actually producing power. And the company came back and told the new owner, my client, my buyer, that he owed money for producing this, for having having to lease this solar panel. Well, there was a legal issue, and one thing led to another. They backed down. He had to get a lawyer, and it was like this issue. So there's a lot of things that can happen when it goes to transfer the property. When you go to sell the property, make sure you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. So that would be my only thing, outside of the fact that when you do a lease, you don't get value out of the house or more value out of it.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads me to my next question. Does solar add value to a home?
Absolutely. It's like a pool, right? So you can say I have a pool in the backyard, and some people will be like, yeah, that's great. I don't really want a pool, so I'm just going to bury it. But I just spent $100,000 on this pool. I don't care. I don't want the pool. So there's no intrinsic value to the buyer. And value is in the eye of the beholder, right? So when you put solar on it and you buy it, you pay it off, or it's financed, there's an actual asset value to it. When you lease it or PPA it, I'm not sure what that term is. It's a leased item. So it's an attachment. It's a lease. It's a liability. So it's not a negative value, because you do get utility out of it. You get lower price, power, right? And everybody knows if you live in California, power, unless you're in Santa Clara City, power is expensive. Electricity is expensive. Gas is expensive. And that's just, it's not just here, it's on all the coast cities or coast states. It's just naturally more expensive. So just be careful what you're doing. I love the whole idea of what Jeff is doing, where you have an idea of being able to shop 4 different companies and understand what the costs are and what the outs are and everything. And, I think that's a fantastic option that I didn't have. When I did it, I want to say it was 15 years ago, and guy put the contract in front of me. I'm like, I'm saving money. I don't care. And absolutely, there's a value of, I'm stuck at, I can't remember what it was, 14 cents per kilowatt. And now I don't know what it is, but I know I'm intrinsically stuck at that 14 cents less the true up. And so that's a value to me. It absolutely is. My electricity is a little bit less than all my neighbors.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Yep.
And then anything and so in terms of this old roof, would you say if you have an old roof, or should you even get solar on that, or what's your take on that?
So hard closing salesman will tell you, we'll pay to have the solar panels taken off when you do go to replace it. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know every company, but my company, they told me. I asked the question because my roof was relatively new at that time, and but yeah, it's a cost. You're going to have to suck up that cost and be aware of it. And that should be something that you, as a real estate person, salesperson, you should have that conversation with your clients. As a homeowner, you should know what you're getting into. And, I'm sure Jeff does a bang up job knocking that stuff out and saying, hey, look, when it comes to time to replace your roof, it's going to cost you about $6,000, $7,000. I don't know what the cost, right? Don't get alarmed, but I have no idea what that is. But at the same time, you have to be there. Zach, how much does it cost?
So I wanted to bring Zach on here. Sorry to surprise you, Zach. But can you explain to us some of the process? I'm sure you encounter this a lot. People who have old roofs, who that roof needs to be replaced. So they're not necessarily going to put new solar panels on it because it costs about $3,000 to $7,000 to take off and reinstall, right?
Yeah,
What's
no.
yours?
I mean, as far as roofs go, right? I mean, like when we had to have our site survey team to go out, we had to test the integrity of it. We had to look at the integrity of it. We had to look at the condition of everything. You know, we had to do our part in making sure, you know, when we stamp our name on it and we send it off to, you know, PG&E or Edison or whoever utility company it is, because we have our inspection card, we have to make sure everything's, you know, in line and congruent. But as far as like the costs go, I mean, everything's going to estimate, you know, in terms of whatever the size of the roof is, whatever size, you know, sometimes only 20% of the roof needs replacement. Sometimes 80% of the roof needs replacement. Sometimes we only do where we actually install the panels. But the main thing is, as far as roofs go, that I kind of like is that you can bundle it with the solar where you're still able to get that tax incentive. So if you just do the roof alone, you're not going to be able to get that 30%. And I mean, it's not, you know, the 30% isn't guaranteed, just as a reminder out there. But yeah, as far as roofing and solar, we try to pair those up as much as possible.
So you're saying that if you do need a new roof at the time that you're considering installing solar, that as part of the solar loan and financing, you could actually finance the new roof as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you can wrap all that up into one loan.
And you get the 30% off of that too, the 30% tax credit.
Yes, sir.
Potential.
Nice.
Wow. All right. That's something.
That's the difference between a hard salesperson and a good quality salesperson. Zach is going to take the time to educate you on all that information and not just force you into something just so that you can get onto the next house. Right. And that's what you really want to look for, is somebody that's going to take care of you and not just slam you into a deal and never talk to you again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that, Vito. Actually, if I could share, so the client that I had, they had 3 homes today. They had a cabin, they have their home down in LA, and then they actually have a home out in Santa Rosa where I currently live. And for instance, I could have sold this client at least 2 of the 3. The cabin they don't really use. They don't have enough usage. But as far as the home that's in Santa Rosa, they're actually what do you guys call it? It's a certain term for agreement whenever the loans, like they just purchased this home. So they don't know what the actual usage is, because the usage of a solar panel, of, you know, your solar system is based off the customer of whoever's going to be living in the home. So, you know, I told him, I said, I don't feel comfortable selling you a system whenever it's not fit to your needs. It's fit to the needs that was prior for the annual. So it's just, you know, there's a lot of shaky stuff that goes within the solar industry. There's a lot of flyby companies that come in, and like how you guys experience, and I'm sorry you guys had to go through this, but you know, a company that went bankrupt, and you know, they were no longer to even, you know, help out with like the warranties and stuff. Like all that stuff is washed away. There's no one that you could call. There's no one that you could reach out to. That's why here at iLeverage, like we try to, you know, do the best in terms of having someone that's been in the industry for 10 to 20 years or even longer, you know, someone that's reputable, someone that we know within our counterparts, so that we don't run into situations like this. And I'm, you know, I think it sounded like you guys got that all under control, and you know, hopefully that client's better off. But yeah.
Yeah, well, the buyers had no choice to assume that lease if they wanted to go forward with the home, so they ended up assuming that lease. So I think actually that brings us to the next part of this discussion is, so that solar company that they leased those panels with, American Solar Direct, at the time was one of the fastest growing solar companies in the U.S. And then 5 short years later, they went bankrupt. So and I honestly, the contract that the sellers signed, when I looked at it, wasn't 100. They weren't getting 100% of the usage. So it wasn't 100% contract. They actually agreed to a 70% contract. And these sellers, English wasn't their primary language. And so my take on that was that they got taken advantage of. So how do you kind of vet these companies? Like, it seems like there's very little regulation in terms of the solar industry. It's so fast changing. Like,
Mhm.
how would you go about shopping for solar companies and making sure that they're reputable and that the contract that you're signing is actually a legit
Yeah.
contract?
I think where I would actually start, Carla, is one, obviously look at who's coming to your door, because typically you're greeted. You're not, or I mean, you go to Costco, you can get Sunrun, but typically a lot of this business is done on the doors. So one, obviously who you're buying from. Two, you get the quality of the panels, the type of panels that would be going on your roof. And then you do a deep dive into their, at least the company and everything. I actually provide a lot of that stuff, and just before we even get started on our conversation, or, I don't even talk about the sale. I just talk about, because these are the problems that come up all the time, right? These are the problems that a lot of people face in the solar industry. I can't tell you how many times I've door knocked in Sacramento, even homes near Santa Rosa where I live, where they've had, and even Sunrun. I mean, even Sunrun, they've had a couple mistakes, but they've had their solar system on their home for 6 months. They didn't have the PTO, which is the permission to operate, where you turn on your system and then you actually get charged for your solar energy, and you no longer have your PG&E bill in terms of the Santa Rosa homes. People had their system on for 6 months, and a lot of times, like, all this is a lot of door knockers come in and they just try to get the install done so they get paid out, and then after the install is done, you don't hear back from them or the company. That's a lot of the horror stories that go on within this company, or not this company, but the industry.
Mm-hmm. So a thorough vetting obviously needs to be done. And like, is that just looking at Better Business Bureau for reviews or complaints, or like what exactly? I mean, if people don't have access to you, Zach, like how can they go about protecting themselves?
It's honestly tough, because like I said, like as I mentioned, Sunrun, with that company, they had a couple errors. I'm not saying that everyone's perfect, or errors don't happen, but I would almost go through who you know. That way you have more of like a tie of more of a tie with that person, or the person that you're being sold from. I wouldn't recommend just buying from anyone. As far as like the smaller companies, I would definitely do more research for.
So who are some of the big name
Big
reputable?
names. I mean, like a lot of our partners, like we have SunPower, which is massive. Sunrun, they're massive. Cubics, they're very good. They've been in it for 15 years, a little over, like more than 15 years. ESP has been in the solar industry for, I believe, 15 plus years as well. So
Okay.
there's like a lot of vetting that goes on through there. As far as like the client, like I said, I would just do the research on the company. I would go through, look at all the reviews, look at the Google reviews. That's really going to show you like, hey, what's up, what's going on with this company, kind of thing. If people are, facing a lot of issues, and you got to be careful as well, because sometimes company delete those type of negative reviews. So again, it's very hard to vet. I would honestly just go based off of, if someone in your neighborhood has a solar system, and I would ask them how their experience was. I think that's honestly the best bet, and then I would get that person, whoever sold to them. That's honestly that's really the easiest way to sum it up, because like I said, there's so many things that go on in this industry until it gets regulated. There's a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, word of mouth, referrals, that's always the best way to find.
That's the tough thing when it's not a regulated industry, right? I mean,
Mhm.
just the whole presentation of it. That's why you hire a real estate agent, a realtor, because we have a process. We have a code of ethics, and we have brokers that we have to report to. Yeah. I'm a broker, but I also report to a corporate broker in case something goes awry. And we have processes in place that make sure that our clients are protected. And because I've been doing it for 19 years, I was just talking to another client of mine. You have these processes in place that take out the name. So in case a seller happens to be racist or whatever, it has nothing to do with it. All we're seeing is black and white and green, right? I don't care about the who's buying the house. I want to make sure that my client gets the best deal, best terms, best everything. And that's what's important. So we take all that out of the way and we just focus on what's important. When it goes to selling a house, you want to be there all the time. You want somebody that's going to be there and not just sign a contract and the next thing you know, he's gone. He never talks to you again. You want somebody that's going to be responsive and talks to you all the time and say, these are the steps that's going on. What happens if? And that's a big question. What happens if Sunrun, not that they're going anywhere, but American, whatever, you heard that was in the news for a very long time. What happens when that company folds? What's going to happen to this contract? Does it just go away? Am I free and clear? Or is another company going to assume it? Who do I call? Where's the 1-800 number of, holy cow, something just happened?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
And it's, carpe diem, right? I mean, people have to understand what they're getting into. You're buying $1 million house or a $2 million house. You're putting a $30,000, $40,000 unit on top of that roof. You're responsible for it. So, don't just go with the first guy that, says here, this is the best deal that you have. Go with somebody that's reputable, that's been around for a while. Absolutely. And has those contingencies in place to protect you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Let's bring on Scott Hill with Hill Mortgage. He is our mortgage broker, and I'd love to get, Scott, your take on the process, because you are definitely involved in terms of when it comes time to sell the home and the buyer assumes that lease. As the mortgage broker, you have a say in that.
Yeah.
Correct?
Absolutely, and thanks to the other panelists here, you guys educated me on a lot of things. As the mortgage professional, we sometimes get hidden from a lot that's going on. It's our job to make sure the client can get the mortgage and buy the house, right? And I myself, like Vito said, I have solar, and just a quick story on my home. I was fortunate enough that the seller owed probably about $30,000 on his loan on his solar on his home, and just the interaction of us buying the home with him, he was kind enough to pay it off for me. How cool is that? Wow. So I moved in and got a $30,000 loan paid off. But on the flip side, and this is just a side story. We're firing up the new hot tub, we're running it, you're having a great time. And I'm like, I get my PG&E bill and I'm like, this don't look like we got solar.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, what's going on here? He pays off the solar and my bill is outrageous. I got, 3 kids running, computers and the house and energy. And so it turns out the solar wasn't working for like the first 3 or 4 months. And I was going nuts, right, with the power, thinking a lot of it was being covered by solar. So that's when I learned about this true up bill and this and that. And I guess my wife handled it, but we had to deal with PG&E, and they said, oh, we can't refund it. And maybe some of the other panelists can speak to this, but I had to wait until the next January, because I bought in January, to get the refund back. Mm-hmm. For the solar that wasn't working, because I had to pay up front all the utility bills that I was, going nuts on. So that's something maybe one of you guys can answer for me at some point what I've done. But in terms of as a mortgage broker, what we're looking at is our buyer going to be able to qualify? And it all starts with communication. And we were all learning, right? Real estate agents were learning, lenders were learning, brokers, originators were learning. And there was a lot of lack of communication. People would buy a home. We'd be the last to hear that, there's solar on this property. And then we're scrambling to try to figure out, is the client going to qualify and all of that, especially if it's leased, or if there's some kind of a lien and they're making payments, right, to eventually own the panels or what have you. So nowadays it's gotten really easy. The biggest nightmare that I've had, and by the way, that, I just wrote a little screenshot here of, you own outright, you lease, or you finance. Those are the big 3. Okay.
That's some awesome graphics, Scott.
You like that? I
love that.
Carl Rove uses this all the time on the news, and it seems to work. So not quite as nice as Zach's, handwriting on the big board behind, but those are the big 3. And for me, I owned outright right away, so it was pretty easy. But if I get a client that I find out is, going to need to qualify because there's payments being passed on to them that's been negotiated in the transaction, there's two things we got to think about is how's this DTI, the debt to income ratio, going to work out for this buyer, right? Are they going to be able to afford, do they just squeeze in on the mortgage payment, taxes, and insurance? Is this going to push them over the limit, or is it going to be affordable? And then also, if there is a lien on the property, now I've got loan to value things I've got to think about, right? That's also a qualifying factor. Loan to value mean, hey, I've got a $500,000 mortgage. I've got a, $30,000, lien for solar panels or what have you. How does that compare to the value of the home? And that can affect pricing on a mortgage a little bit as well. So those are the main factors that, we're kind of looking at from a mortgage standpoint is qualifying. And the key is communication. And Vito mentioned it earlier as well. Let your mortgage professional know up front what we're about to get into with this buyer, so we properly prepare them from a qualifying standpoint. One horror story that I did run into, and I really don't run into them very much. We were doing a refinance for one of my really good clients, and I thought everything was going to go fine. I locked the loan for 30 days, your typical, loan lock to preserve a great rate. And this was in 2020. And the solar company, it was probably one of these ones that Zach was mentioning, more of a fly by night, knock on the door and get the business. They were not working with us at all. They were not budging. And typically they would not, we could not get them to remove the lien, subordinate, work with us to put the new mortgage on, to replace their existing mortgage and give them a lower rate. And it was just badgering back and forth. And this went on for about 3 weeks. And I just told the client, don't worry, your loan lock is going to expire, but I'm going to take care of it for you. I'm going to eat it. Don't worry about it. But they caused a lot of problems for us. And I don't even know if they're in business, don't remember their name, but majority of solar companies really do their best to work with you and make it pretty easy nowadays that everybody's getting more familiar with purchasing a home with solar. That was just the biggest horror story that I had and have not found that since. It's been pretty smooth sailing most of the time. So, but it's communication and us qualifying the clients on and learning about their loan to value and attacking it on the front end. Not too late once we got a couple weeks to go. We don't like surprises as mortgage brokers with solar.
Let everybody know the first couple of days you're in contract. And then that's all you have to worry about, because everybody's got to do their own due diligence, title, escrow, lending, real estate. Everybody has to know what's going on. And if you're not doing it until the 25th day, you're going to put a lot of people into a tailspin. Yes.
That's absolutely the case. And if we know up front, it's usually a breeze to work with it. It's no different than real estate agents that don't tell you that the client's buying a flip that just took place, 3 weeks ago. And it's like, we need to know all that stuff, right? And so it's just education. It's letting your partners know. But everyone's gotten really great about letting us know nowadays. Solar, why? Because it's becoming so much more prevalent in the marketplace.
So something that you said that I didn't realize, so there's a potential that if the buyer's shopping at the top of their price point and they're like this close with their DTI, that solar could push them over the edge and they could not qualify for the home. Is that right?
That is correct. And go ahead, Vito. Answer.
When the market is like firestorm hot, like it was back before April 22, where the only way you're going to get an offer accepted is if you have zero contingencies, you better have enough to cover not only your down payment, but also an appraisal gap and closing costs and everything else. So, you're looking at 20%. There's a lot of sliding room there, right? Because you can go down to 10%, 5% of conventional or jumbo, or you do all that magic, all the number and the P in the shells there game. But you need to have that conversation with the client saying, look, if this comes in, this is how it's going to be. Today, we have more buyers than we have sellers. There's houses that are sitting on market 30, 40, 50 days. And those concessions are being dealt out there. There's less contingencies, so that the loan contingency, which this is the perfect example. If you came in and you're right at the top of your DTI and all of a sudden there's a lease there and that has to go into your DTI and it pushes you over, there's some magic that Scott can do, but he can only do so much. And if there's no way you can qualify for that house anymore, for that loan anymore, then you have to cancel that contract. And if you don't have that loan contingency in place, you're out that deposit.
That's right.
You could lose 3% of the purchase price. And when it's $1 million house, that's $30,000. That's a lot of money to walk away from. So be very careful.
Yeah.
So one way to protect against that, if you are the buyer and you see solar panels on the home, regardless of if it's leased or if it's financed, if there's a payment there, you need to let your mortgage person know right away and then rerun the numbers. So typically, if you're shopping for a home, especially in the Bay Area, like Vito said, contingencies are all typically removed. So you've been approved for that loan, but they have to rerun the numbers with those panels and make sure that you're fully underwritten and approved for that specific instance before you even write an offer without contingencies.
Absolutely. That front end work is so important.
And if you're selling the house, disclose. It doesn't cost you anything to give your real estate agent all of your invoices, your receipts for the last 5 to 6 months, so that Scott can take that and say, okay, on average, this is how much it's going to cost them.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question for you guys. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the loan, does it show the full loan of the solar system, or does it show
attachment on the prelim? Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know if it's just our finance company or what, but basically they have it to where it only is going to, because it's a utility loan, basically, it's only going to show the monthly rate in terms of like the DTI. I don't know if it's just our finance company that was able to work that out, the one that I go through, but they were able to confirm that, and I haven't had any issues.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the
There's different ways for it to show up on title.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about these lease panels were they weren't even on title. So actually, it wasn't even a condition of closing, which was
sometimes we'll ask for the promissory note sometimes, and get as much of the data as we can, and then dig a little deeper on the front end,
Got you. Okay.
So that's really the mortgage professional who does that, and because their main job is to make sure that the buyer can afford the payment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So even if it doesn't show up on title, you're still doing your homework on the back end to see what the deal is. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So please always let your mortgage professional know up front, because we have the tools to do the digging to find out. But if we're made aware of it at the last second, it can be a problem. So we're not going to see the property most of the time, and that's so helpful to let us know right away if it's a possible solar situation.
Okay. Perfect.
So while we're on the subject, what if you're a homeowner preparing to sell your home, you have solar, what items should they prepare beforehand before going on market? We have the solar bills, lease, Vito.
I like cupcakes. So when I show up to your house, cupcake pie. I love pie. Apple pie is my favorite. Coffee is okay. I'm okay. Yeah. And but yeah, here's the thing. You should have a go file of everything that you ever did, not just for Scott or me or the buyers or what for taxes, right? Every improvement you've ever done, you should stuff that receipt into the little file of everything, right? Anytime you pull a permit, anytime you do any kind of improvement, you replaced a light switch, have a receipt in a file so that we can go back. And I know that it's a pain in the butt. I've been in my house for almost 20 years. You should see how thick my go file is. It has everything in it. And it's just something that you want to have. But you absolutely should have that file. And a good solar company will actually have your lease on file. You want to have 5 to 6 months of the back receipts, your invoices that you paid, because a buyer is going to want to know what your utilities are, not just for solar, but for electricity and gas and water and what internet I should go to, what cable company, right? So you need to know all of that. And if you have that all in a file, we can just kind of thumb through it and figure it out and say, yes, we need this stuff. The rest of the stuff, say for taxes.
All right.
So, yep. And apple pie.
You're a Marine. Apple pie? tell anybody.
Hey, thank you for your service, man.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
Scott's a squid too, so
I actually just got out of the Coast Guard January 2nd. So
Right on.
Thank you for your service.
appreciate it.
We got 3 vets on here. Do you expect that? Huh?
my uncle was in the Coast Guard, and he was on a ship years ago, way before I was even born, right? And he loves sun tanning. That's his thing, right? I mean, so he was on top of it. Everybody was down below eating chow, and he was on a clipper ship. I don't know what kind of ship. And the captain turned the boat, and he flipped over in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And typically when that kind of stuff happens, Scott, when you're on a ship, they don't turn around. But somehow, some miracle, they found him. Found him missing. Like, hey, where's Carlson? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, they man overboard drill, and they figured it out, and they actually found him floating like 45 minutes later in the Pacific Ocean.
That's because someone like me, a rescue swimmer, found him.
That's hilarious.
You're probably sleeping 3 hours of the cot.
So Zach, you have really great VA benefits when it comes to buying a home. So maybe that needs to be your next discussion.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I definitely need to get more educated on that side as of just getting out, because I'm going to be looking here soon. So
You're in Santa Rosa?
I'm in Santa Rosa, but I rent an office down here in Millbrae. So I'm going to be moving down here in San Mateo area.
I have a good friend who works for, what's the county up there? Sonoma County?
Sonoma.
Oh, up there.
No. Right.
Yeah.
Sonoma's up in like the Santa Rosa is Sonoma.
Yeah. So he's a deputy sheriff for Sonoma.
Mm-hmm.
I served with him in the reserves, in the Marine Reserves, and his job is to hang underneath a helicopter and rescue people.
Oh yeah, I have a couple friends. Actually, the base that I was working at in Petaluma, we actually trained the rescue swimmers.
Oh, that's cool. You probably know him then. Yeah.
We got Coast Guard guys going through with us in a rescue swimmer training back in Pensacola. It was cool.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. That's cool. Small world.
So that about wraps up that discussion about solar. We covered all of the 2023 updates, NEM 2.0 to 3.0 happening in April. So if you are thinking about going solar, now would be the time, right? Zach, when is the cutoff to be grandfathered into NEM 2.0?
So we have a couple installers or install companies. Like Jeff has mentioned, he had it on the layout in his slide. The main thing that we want to focus on is, the interconnection agreement. That's what solidifies you into, being in the NEM 2.0 and being grandfathered for 20 years. That typically takes about 6 weeks by the time that you actually sign the documents. So by the time you sign the documents, it's going to be 6 weeks. So we're looking at, a soft date would be February. Like February 1st would be like the best, but no later than February, mid February, just to have that buffer.
Okay.
It's pretty soon. It's pretty soon. It's right around the corner.
So after that, you're gonna have to buy a battery, which is like $10K or something, and that adds to the cost of their loan.
Yeah, so batteries start out at anywhere from $10,000 to $21,000. For a $10,000 battery, you're looking at least a $60 increase a month. So that's the biggest change. So for my client, he was at $163 a month. He would be paying $223 at a minimum if we sign today.
All right, so that's definitely a key update this year. Aside from all of the solar benefits, obviously there's a lot more to consider in terms of choosing the right company, things to consider when it comes to selling your home, in terms of financing and getting that new buyer to assume that lease. Any last comments about going solar?
I'll say, hey, with mortgage rates going up, why not go solar and save some money there, right? So help offset the increased payments in your mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Great time for it. I've been happy with my solar.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, solar is a great way to go. You get locked in. So that's the thing. When you buy a house, I say you get economically locked in, unless you refinance, right? That's more on Scott's side. But you get locked in. If you rent a house and it's $2,500 a month, and then your rent can go up at any time, right? There's certain rules, but it can go up, and every year it probably will. If you buy a house for $3,000 a month, you get economically locked in at $3,000 a month unless you refinance. And for 30 years, you're paying $3,000 a month. It's the same thing with solar. If you get solar right now, you get locked in at that price, whatever that is, the 163 or whatever Zach was saying, $200, 200, whatever it is. In 5 to 10 years, it could be $400 a month. I know my neighbors right now are paying $400 or $500 a month because of the heater, and it's cold out, but that's pretty standard these days, right? So you're saving money right away, and you get economically locked in for the next 20 years. So you're doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one tip real quick. For anyone that is going out there and doesn't go solar with us, which I don't know why you guys wouldn't.
Call Zach.
Whenever you guys, so just real quick. Whenever you have someone come to your door and you're going to be purchasing a system, you want to make sure where you see how Carla was talking about the 70% offset. That means that you're only getting 70% usage. You need to make sure that you're at least a minimum of 100%. But not only that, you need to have that. We, as I leverage, we actually add an extra 20% to add a buffer period where, say if you want to run your heating, your air conditioning a little bit more than normal, your usage is not going to be the same every year. I don't care if you're the same family living in the home. Your usage is not going to be the same. It may be a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but you have that 20% cushion. If you want to get an electric car, if you want to add a pool, if you get 2 electric cars, whatever it may be, that allows you to stay away and keep yourself from getting a true up bill is what they call, where you have to actually owe PG&E or whatever utility company, services you. That's my like one main thing is you got to be able to have the solar company hook you up with extra production for that cause, especially right now where you're able to get grandfathered in to actually receive credits for that. So.
That is such a great tip. Thank you for sharing that. So don't settle for anything less than 100%. Output, is that what it's called?
100% output, but I would honestly, don't just do 120% just to be safe.
Okay. And so if anybody watching this now or in the future finds any value in this and wants to consult with Zach, Jeff, Scott, Vito, or I, we are happy to do a group consultation with you if you want maybe a home value comparison. If you're thinking about getting solar, I want to know if it's actually how much value it's going to add to your home. Vito and I are happy to do that for you. Refinancing, it sounds like maybe if you have solar on your home, that's something you may want to consult with Scott about. And then, of course, if you're thinking about solar and you want to discuss that with a trustworthy solar expert, Zach will be here. So thank you all for being here today. And till next time.
Awesome.
That was good.
Thank you,
awesome.
guys.
Thank you for having
Thanks.
us.
Bye. Thank you.